They laughed when the bride arrived with no shoes, until the mountain man carried her inside. The air inside High Ridge Station always felt a little too clean, like it had been washed and polished until it forgot what real weather was. Even the cold was controlled here. It was a careful cold, made by machines and measured by sensors, the kind that never surprised anyone. Still, the ceremonial deck was kept colder than the rest of the station because the delegates liked it that way. Many of them came from worlds where cold meant status and strength. Frost glass tiles spread across the platform like a lake that had decided to become a floor. Under the transparent surface, thin lines of light moved slowly, copying the look of ice veins. Rows of seats circled the platform. They were filled with visitors from far systems, tall beings with shining scales, round beings wrapped in soft fabric suits, thin beings with floating translators around their throats. Some blinked with 2 eyes, some with 6. Some did not blink at all. Cameras hovered above them like silent birds, recording everything for diplomatic archives and entertainment feeds. At the center of the platform stood the efficient, an older station official in a formal coat, a human, but one who had spent most of his life with aliens and spoke in careful, neutral tones. He checked the time and glanced toward the entrance. "This is a rare moment," he said, voice carried by the station's sound system. "A binding ceremony recognized by the conquered and witnessed by its members. Let it be recorded as a day of trust." The word trust was translated instantly into dozens of languages. Some translations came out as contract. Others came out as shared oxygen. One came out as 2 hearts agreeing not to run away. In the front row, a group of delegates from the Vayashi leaned together. Their faces were smooth and pale, like carved stone, and their eyes were narrow and bright. They watched the platform with an expression that looked like mild curiosity mixed with doubt. Behind them, 2 Marrow traders whispered, their soft fins fluttering as they spoke. A high-ranking Skarn diplomat sat perfectly still, his heavy ceremonial necklace shining like metal fruit. Most of them were here because this ceremony was unusual. It was not just about 2 people. It was about an alliance between settlements and trade routes, about proof that humans could join the wider galaxy without being treated like a dangerous mystery. Humans were new compared to the old species. Humans were clever, fast, and emotional. The conquered liked their inventions, but it did not always trust their hearts. Today, the conquered would watch a human tradition. Many expected it to be entertaining. Some expected it to be embarrassing. At the far end of the platform stood Kellen Ridgeborn. He did not stand like the other humans on the station. Most station humans carried themselves like they were always aware of rules and cameras. Kellen stood like he belonged to wind and stone, not metal corridors. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in formal clothing that still looked slightly uncomfortable on him, as if the fabric wished it were a heavy coat. His hair was dark and slightly messy, as though it had refused to learn station manners. His hands were calm at his sides, but there was a quiet strength in the way he held himself, like an old mountain that did not need to prove it was there. He looked toward the entrance and waited. The station doors opened with a soft sigh. A line of attendants stepped through first, their clothing bright and ceremonial. Behind them came the bride. Ilara Vance moved slowly, not because she wanted to create drama, but because the floor was colder than she expected. The frost glass looked beautiful, but it stole heat through skin faster than her mind could fully accept. She kept her shoulders steady and her face calm, like someone walking into a difficult dream. She was barefoot. Not just without shoes, barefoot in a way that made it clear it was a choice. Her feet touched the ice floor directly. The cold bit at her skin and faint fog rose near her steps. She held her dress carefully so it would not drag. Her hands were steady, but her fingers were a little pale from the chill. For a second, the whole platform was silent, like the station had paused to see what would happen next. Then a small sound rippled through the crowd. A laugh. Not a loud, cruel laugh, but a surprised one. It began in one corner, then another. A few delegates made soft, clicking sounds that meant amusement in their cultures. A Vayashi delegate lifted his chin and let out a neat, controlled chuckle. "Elaborate," someone murmured through a translator. "Primitive," whispered someone else, not realizing the microphones could catch more than they expected. A Marrow trader tilted his head, fins fluttering. "Is this a human comedic display?" The efficient froze for a moment, unsure whether to interrupt. He had seen many cultural misunderstandings, but this was supposed to be a respectful moment. Ilara heard the laughter. Her face did not change much, but her eyes flickered. She kept walking. Inside her, fear rose like cold water. Not fear of the crowd hurting her, there would be no harm here. The Concord rules were strict. It was a safe place. But embarrassment could still feel sharp, and the laughter made her feel exposed in a way the cold did not. She had practiced this. She had chosen this. No shoes. No protection between her and the station floor. No comfort offered by technology, just her moving forward on trust. She told herself that the meaning mattered more than the moment. She reminded herself why she was doing this. Kellen watched her approach. His eyes stayed on her feet first, then lifted to her face. The laughter reached him too. Some of it came through translators as polite amusement, but he understood the sound underneath, judgment. His jaw tightened. Kellen had lived on a world that did not care about judgment. The mountains where he grew up did not laugh. They just stood there, huge and silent, and tested you without apology. Snowstorms did not ask if you were ready. Thin air did not care if you were tired. When you survived those mountains, you did not learn pride. You learned respect for nature, for effort, for people who walked into the cold because they believed something was worth it. He took one step forward. A few delegates noticed and stopped laughing, not because they understood, but because his movement changed the energy on the platform. He walked with purpose, not rushing, not dramatic, but direct. His boots made a deeper sound than the others, the kind of sound that made you imagine rock beneath the floor. Ilara's steps slowed. Her toes were already numb at the edges, and the cold was climbing higher. Her breathing stayed even, but her body wanted to hurry. She refused. This was not a race. This was a message. The laughter faded into whispers as Kellen crossed the platform toward her. A Skarn diplomat leaned slightly forward, eyes narrowing. Skarn culture respected strength, and Kellen moved like strength that did not need permission. A small drone near the ceiling adjusted its camera angle, tracking him. Kellen reached Ilara before she got to the center. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could feel warmth coming off him even in the cold air. For a second, neither of them spoke. The station's translation system waited. The cameras hovered, steady and alert. Ilara looked up at him. Her eyes were clear. She did not look angry. She did not look like someone asking to be rescued. She looked like someone offering a truth and waiting to see if it would be accepted. Kellen's voice was low, meant for her, but microphones caught it anyway. "You're freezing," he said. Ilara's lips curved slightly, almost a smile. "I know." Kellen glanced at the crowd, then back to her. The laughter had stopped completely now, like someone had shut off a sound. The silence felt heavy. Some delegates waited for the bride to explain herself. Others waited for someone to correct her. A few were already composing their private reports. Human ceremony appears disorganized. Human bride lacks proper attire. Kellen did not care. He bent slightly and slid one arm behind Ilara's back and the other under her knees. Ilara inhaled sharply, surprised by the sudden change, but she did not pull away. Her hands caught his shoulder and chest for balance. Her dress shifted like a soft wave. For one heartbeat, she was weightless. Then he lifted her. Not with effort, not with show, but with quiet certainty, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. He held her carefully, securely, and the cold air seemed to pull back from the space between them. A sound ran through the crowd again, but this time it was not laughter. It was a soft, collective intake of breath. Even species that did not breathe made a similar reaction, a small lift of posture, a change in color, a flicker of attention. The Vayashi delegates stopped smiling. The Marrow traders' fins went still. The Skarn diplomat's eyes widened slightly, the closest thing to surprise he allowed himself in public. Kellen turned, carrying Ilara toward the center of the platform. The officiant blinked fast, mouth opening, then closing again. He looked unsure whether to stop this. He looked at the bride's face, then the groom's, and realized this was not a mistake. This was part of something. Ilara felt warmth flooding back into her feet and legs as they lifted away from the ice. She could still feel the sting of cold in her skin, but it was fading under the simple comfort of being held. Her heart was pounding, not from fear, but from a strong rush of emotion. It felt like relief mixed with gratitude, but also something deeper, a quiet, steady happiness. Kellen carried her with the kind of careful attention people gave to fragile glass, even though Ilara was not fragile. It made her feel seen, not as a symbol, not as a bride for a political moment, as a person he cared about. The station's environmental system noticed changes. It always noticed changes. A set of sensors tracked body temperatures and stress levels. A few readings rose unexpectedly. Increased heart rate, elevated stress markers among the delegates, sudden shifts in attention patterns. The system made a small adjustment to keep the area comfortable. The air warmed by a fraction, not enough for most species to notice, but enough for Alara's skin to feel it. Kellen reached the center. He did not put her down immediately. He turned slightly, placing himself between Alara and the crowd in a subtle way, like a wall made of kindness. The efficient cleared his throat. "Ah," he said carefully, "it appears the groom has chosen to assist." A translator turned assist into claim in one language and into honor in another. A Vayashi delegate leaned toward his neighbor and whispered, "Is the bride ill?" A Skarn aide whispered back, "No, the human male is demonstrating possession." Another aide from a species that valued emotional bonds whispered, "No, he is demonstrating devotion." Kellen finally set Alara down, but he did it on a small ceremonial rug that had been placed near the center, a strip of fabric with earth patterns woven into it. It was not thick, but it was warmer than the frost glass. Alara's feet touched it, and she felt a gentle difference, like stepping onto memory. She straightened her dress and stood beside him. Her posture stayed steady. Her face was calm again, but her eyes looked brighter now. The efficient looked between them, searching his training notes in his head. Human ceremonies could vary a lot. Some involved spoken vows. Some involved shared food. Some involved rings, ribbons, or hand fasting. This one clearly involved something else. He chose a safe approach. "Let it be witnessed," the efficient said, voice firmer now, "that the couple stands together." The crowd remained silent, watching. The laughter was gone, replaced by a strange tension. Not anger, not fear, more like confusion mixed with interest. Alara glanced at the delegates, then at Kellen. She could have explained herself right then. She could have told them in clear words that the barefoot walk was not a joke. It was a promise. A way to say, "I will step into your world without armor because I believe you will not let it break me." But explanations were fragile. People could twist words. Actions were harder to twist. Kellen had answered the laughter without argument. He had answered it with a simple truth. If she chose trust, he chose responsibility. The station cameras zoomed slightly, capturing the small details. The way his hand hovered close to hers, ready if she needed support. The faint red marks on her toes from the cold. The way the crowd's faces had shifted from amusement to attention. In the second row, a young delegate from a small moon colony watched with wide eyes. Her species was new to the conquered, too. She had grown up hearing that the galaxy was a place where you survived by hiding your soft parts. Watching a man carry a barefoot bride across a frozen floor made her feel something tighten in her chest. She did not have a word for it in her language, but her translator offered one anyway. Hope. The efficient continued the formal words, speaking slowly so every translator could keep up. Highridge Station recognizes the binding of Alara Vance and Kellen Ridgeborn under conquered law and human tradition. A pause. "Before the vows are spoken," he added, "is there any statement the couple wishes to offer the witnesses?" All eyes turned to Alara. She felt the weight of attention, but it did not crush her. It steadied her. She looked across the crowd, not with anger, not with shame, but with clear honesty. Her voice was simple, human, unarmed. "I came without shoes on purpose," she said. A wave of quiet spread through the delegates. Some translators hesitated, unsure whether to add extra meaning. None did. Alara continued. "It's an old human symbol. It means I step forward with no barrier. I trust the person I'm joining, and I trust the place that will become our home." Her words landed like soft stones dropped into still water. The ripples moved outward. A Vayashi delegate tilted his head. "You trust a place?" his translator asked, sounding confused. Alara nodded. "Yes." She glanced at Kellen. He was watching her, not the crowd. His attention felt like shelter. Alara looked back at the witnesses. "And if the ground is too cold," she added quietly, "then he carries me, not because I'm weak, but because that's what trust looks like when it becomes real." The silence after that was deep. No one laughed. Some delegates looked down at the frost glass floor, as if seeing it differently now. Some looked at Kellen's hands, as if realizing those hands were not just strong, but careful. The efficient swallowed and nodded as though he had just learned something he had not expected to learn at work. Kellen spoke next, voice steady. "She doesn't have to prove anything to you," he said. not harsh, not loud, just firm. But she wanted you to witness what we mean, so you can understand humans better than your rumors do. A few delegates shifted uncomfortably at the word rumors. Kellen added, "We don't show strength by making someone suffer. We show it by making sure they don't have to." That sentence moved through translators like a spark traveling through wires. Different languages shaped it differently, but the core stayed. Strength as care. The officiant nodded once more, then raised his hand slightly, returning to the ceremony with a new respect in his tone. "Then let the vows begin," he said. Alara reached for Kellen's hand. This time he did not hesitate. Their fingers linked, warm against warm. Around them, Hyridge Station held its careful cold, but something had changed anyway. The platform still glittered like ice. The delegates still sat in their rows, the cameras still hovered, but the feeling in the air was different. Less like a show, more like a lesson being learned in real time. Alara stood barefoot on the small rug, feet still marked by the cold, but her posture was steady and proud. Kellen stood beside her like a quiet promise, and in the crowd, more than one delegate began to wonder what other human traditions they had misunderstood. Somewhere above, the station's official feed tagged the moment with a new label, chosen by an automatic system that had no opinion, only patterns. Unexpected cultural significance. In private, several delegates opened messages to send home. They did not know how to explain what they had seen. They only knew it mattered. As the officiant spoke the next words, Alara glanced down at the frost glass floor beyond the rug. It still looked beautiful, but now it also looked honest. It did not pretend to be gentle. It was cold, and it stayed cold. She looked up again, meeting Kellen's eyes. The vows were about to begin, but Alara already felt like the most important part had happened. The crowd had laughed. The world had been cold. The ceremony continued, but the energy in the platform had shifted completely. What had begun as a simple formal gathering had become something far more compelling, though the delegates could not immediately name why. The act of a human man carrying a barefoot bride had done more than stop the laughter. It had sparked curiosity, awe, and a quiet reverence that spread through every species present. It was subtle at first, like warmth creeping over a frozen lake, but it was there, undeniable. Alara stood next to Kellen, her hands resting lightly in his, her breathing steady despite the lingering chill in her feet. She was no longer nervous nor embarrassed. She could feel the strength of the man beside her not as dominance, but as a silent promise of protection and understanding. Each delegate in the room, regardless of species, sensed something new about humans in that moment. They were strong not by force but by heart. The officiant glanced down at his notes and realized that words alone could not capture the significance of what had happened. He adjusted his tone, speaking slowly and deliberately so that the universal translators could convey the right meaning. "Let it be known that humans have a custom that demonstrates trust through physical vulnerability," he said. His words hung in the air like a delicate chord. "And the groom has responded with equal care and responsibility. This act shall be recorded as part of human tradition, for future reference by the conquered and its members." Some delegates leaned forward, curious. The young Moon Colony delegate who had been watching intently before now leaned further, her eyes wide. She had seen humans in passing before, through station communications and hollow archives, but nothing had prepared her for the depth of understanding conveyed without a single word of argument or explanation. Kellen and Alara moved together toward the center of the ceremonial rug, their hands still joined. Each step they took was deliberate, a mirror of the quiet strength that had guided their entire interaction. Alara's toes were no longer numb, warmed not by clothing or machines, but by the closeness of another human's care. She realized in that instant that trust was not an abstract idea. It was a choice, a series of small, deliberate actions that built a bridge between two people. Several delegates whispered to each other in rapid translations. Some seemed to debate the meaning of the display, others simply observed, unsure of what to think but unable to look away. Even the Vayashi, known for their critical and calculated judgments, were silent. Something about the way the humans moved, the quiet certainty in Kellen's actions, and the calm acceptance in Alara's posture commanded respect. The officiant waited until the crowd had quieted, then continued. "The human tradition demonstrates that trust and care are intertwined. The bride's vulnerability is matched by the groom's responsibility. Let this example serve as a lesson for all cultures. Strength may not always be visible, but it is recognized through the actions taken to support others. Ilara looked around at the gathered crowd, her eyes meeting the reflective scales of the Vayashi, the soft folds of the marrow fins, and the hard metal sheen of the scarn. For the first time, she sensed a connection, not just between herself and Kellen, but between humans and the broader galaxy. She felt that humans could inspire others, not through aggression or displays of dominance, but through patience, empathy, and steadfastness. Kellen spoke then, his voice calm but firm, resonating clearly through the station's translator system. Humans show trust not through words alone, he said. We show it through actions. A person may be capable of standing alone, but the choice to stand together is what makes us strong. Some delegates began to nod subtly. Others tilted their heads, pondering the concept. Many species in the conquered were more accustomed to survival through negotiation, diplomacy, or technical skill. Trust, as demonstrated in action rather than rhetoric, was unfamiliar, yet compelling. The ceremony's focus shifted as the officiant invited them to proceed with the vows. Ilara inhaled deeply and let her gaze settle on Kellen. Words were about to be spoken, yes, but the groundwork had already been laid. The crowd had witnessed a truth more powerful than language. Ilara began, her voice steady, her tone warm and clear. I promise to walk with you, she said, through every path, whether smooth or difficult. I promise to trust in our journey together, even when the ground feels uncertain. Kellen squeezed her hand gently, a quiet signal that he understood. He responded with his own vow, words simple but profound. I promise to support you, not because you cannot manage alone, but because together we are stronger. I promise to carry you when needed, and to walk beside you always. The universal translators broadcast the meaning faithfully, though no translation could fully capture the emotion in the exchange. Yet every delegate, human or alien, sensed it. There was a pause, almost as if the station itself had stopped to listen. After the vows, the officiant smiled, a small human expression of satisfaction. The ceremony demonstrates not only union but understanding, he said. It is a model of interdependence, patience, and mutual care. Some delegates quietly took notes. Others recorded the moment through holographic devices. A few simply stared, mesmerized. The atmosphere was transformed, no longer formal, no longer performative, but deeply sincere. Kellen lowered his gaze to Ilara for a moment, noticing the subtle color return to her cheeks. Her lips formed a tiny smile, the kind that spoke more than grand gestures ever could. She had felt exposed, vulnerable, and yet profoundly seen. There was an intimacy in the simplicity of the act, a connection that surpassed tradition, audience, or expectation. Ilara and Kellen took a slow turn on the ceremonial rug, a gentle motion that mirrored the natural rhythms of the world they had come from. The delegates leaned forward, as if anticipating a new ritual, one that did not exist in any text or archive, but was being born in real time. The station's environmental sensors responded subtly to the change in energy. Temperatures adjusted slightly, airflow softened, and a quiet hum seemed to resonate through the structure. Even the artificial stars projected onto the domed ceiling appeared to shine a little warmer. It was as though the station itself recognized the significance of the human interaction and offered gentle acknowledgement. A young Skarn aide whispered to a colleague, "It is not power as we understand it, but influence, a quiet command." The colleague nodded, intrigued. Ilara glanced around at the crowd. She saw eyes reflecting wonder, curiosity, and in some, a dawning respect. She realized that humans had often been underestimated, not because they lacked skill, but because their strength was subtle, woven into their choices, their care, and their persistence. Kellen moved closer, lowering his voice so only Ilara could hear. You did well, he said softly. Ilara nodded. I only followed through, she replied. He smiled, the kind of smile that did not need words to convey reassurance. Together they stood as partners, as equals, as humans who had shown the galaxy a new perspective. The ceremony proceeded, with each moment marked by quiet observation rather than spectacle. Delegates began to engage with one another, discussing what they had seen. They debated, analyzed, and shared impressions. The consensus was unanimous, even if unspoken. Humans were remarkable not for their technology or speed, but for their capacity to trust, care, and act with integrity. Ilara felt a profound sense of pride, not in herself alone, but in humanity. She realized that her choice to step barefoot onto the cold platform had rippled far beyond her immediate surroundings. The act had demonstrated a principle. Vulnerability could coexist with strength, and compassion could be as commanding as any display of force. Kellen noticed her reflection in the frost glass beneath them. He thought of the mountains where he had grown up, the wind, the ice, the long nights alone. Those experiences had taught him resilience, patience, and respect. But nothing had prepared him for this moment, when his upbringing and her trust converged in a way that would be remembered far beyond the frozen edges of their world. As the ceremony drew to a close, delegates approached with curiosity rather than ceremony. Some asked questions, others simply observed silently. The young Moon Colony delegate stepped forward, hesitating slightly before speaking through her translator. "On my planet," she said, "we learn to survive by hiding what we feel. Watching you, it is different, powerful." Ilara and Kellen exchanged a glance. They understood the meaning. Humans showed power not by concealing their feelings, but by acting through them with purpose and care. Other delegates followed, sharing thoughts and small questions about their own cultures. Slowly, a new dialogue began, one that centered not on hierarchy or dominance, but on trust, empathy, and cooperation. The platform that had once been a stage for formal performance had become a space for genuine exchange, a place where human values were not only seen, but understood. By the end of the day, the legend of the barefoot bride and the mountain man had begun to take root. Stories would spread across trade routes, whispered in quiet corridors and broadcast through secure channels. Humans were no longer merely curious newcomers. They were a species capable of teaching the galaxy something profound about care, responsibility, and shared trust. Ilara felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that she had honored tradition in a way that transcended expectation. Kellen felt a deep respect for the human experience, strengthened by their shared actions and the understanding that had blossomed in that moment. Together, they had created something that words alone could not define, a living demonstration of the human spirit, visible in the simplest of actions, yet powerful enough to change perceptions across the stars. And as the last of the delegates departed, leaving only a few lingering observers and the soft hum of the station, the two humans remained on the ceremonial rug, hand in hand, fully aware of the truth they had shared with the universe. Trust was an action, and love in its quiet. Strength was stronger than any fear. The station's frost-glass floor reflected their image, not as a frozen stage, but as a mirror of choice and courage. It captured a moment where humans had stepped forward, not to prove themselves, but to live their values openly, honestly, and without pretense. For the first time that day, Ilara felt truly at home, not just on the platform, not just beside Kellen, but in the knowledge that humans had once again demonstrated their unique way of shaping the world. It was subtle, it was gentle, and yet it would echo across the stars for generations to come. After the ceremony, High Ridge Station did not immediately return to its usual rhythm. The air felt different, as if the act of carrying a barefoot bride across a frozen floor had subtly shifted the station's energy. Delegates lingered longer than expected, walking slowly, talking quietly, pausing often as though trying to process what they had witnessed. Kellen and Ilara walked side by side, hand in hand, moving toward the quieter corridors that led away from the ceremonial deck. Outside, the station stretched into the void like a silver spine, linking habitats, laboratories, and observation decks. Despite the temperature control, the corridors always smelled faintly of recycled air and metal. It was sterile, and yet it felt alive with the movements of thousands of species coexisting under one roof. Ilara's bare feet made a soft sound on the polished floor, a gentle tap-tap that she almost didn't notice until Kellen lowered his gaze to her. His brow furrowed slightly, not in anger, but in concern. "You should probably put on something for your feet," he said softly, glancing toward the small station shops that lined the corridors. "Even this temperature isn't forgiving for long periods." Ilara shook her head gently. "I want to feel the floor. I need to remember what it felt like. It's part of the promise." Kellen studied her, then nodded. He understood completely. Humans often carried meaning in physical actions that could not be fully explained with words. She had walked barefoot to show trust, and he had carried her to show responsibility. That silent exchange had rippled across the station and beyond, a lesson for anyone paying attention. They moved slowly, letting the hum of the station wash over them. Most of the delegates had returned to their quarters or ships, but a few lingered, curious about the human couple. Some watched from observation windows, speaking quietly in languages that Alara and Kellen could not understand, while others followed from a distance, still trying to decode what they had seen. In one corner, a small group of junior researchers from different species gathered. They were fascinated not by the ceremony itself, but by the human choices that had led to it. One of them, a thin, pale-skinned Vayashi, whispered to a companion, "I have studied humans for decades, their tools, their machines, their ideas. But I had never seen such deliberate care." Another, a Mera with shimmering fins, nodded. "It is simple, yet it communicates far more than any record or calculation ever could." Kellen and Alara entered a small lounge area, one of the few spaces near the ceremonial deck that was warm and quiet. A low, artificial sun glowed overhead, casting gentle light across the walls. Kellen released her hand briefly to let her settle on a cushioned bench. Her toes still tingled faintly from the cold, but the discomfort was fading. Alara leaned back and let her gaze drift to the ceiling. The stars projected above them twinkled gently, and for a moment, the station's hum became background music to their thoughts. Kellen remained standing, though he did not move away. "Did you know," he began softly, "that our species often measures strength by what we can endure alone, what we can survive?" Alara nodded. "I've heard that before, but today was different. Today we measured strength by what we can share, by what we choose to carry for each other." He smiled, the kind that seemed to anchor the entire room in calm. "Exactly." For a few minutes, neither spoke. They listened to the soft whir of life support systems, the distant footsteps of other travelers, the low hum of the station's machinery. There was a rhythm to it, one that reminded them both of the mountains where Kellen had grown up and the forests on Earth where Alara had once walked barefoot. A soft chime interrupted the quiet, signaling an incoming message on Kellen's compad. He glanced down. It was from the station administrator, a formal note requesting a private meeting to discuss the ceremony and its unexpected impact on the delegates. Kellen raised an eyebrow. Alara leaned forward, interest piqued. "Impact?" she asked. "You mean they are talking about us?" He chuckled quietly. "More than talking. They're analyzing, recording, debating. Some of them are even reconsidering how they understand humans." Alara smiled, a mix of pride and amusement. "I didn't expect that. I only wanted to show trust, not start a diplomatic incident." "It's not an incident," Kellen said, kneeling beside her. "It's an example. Sometimes examples speak louder than rules or speeches. You showed them something real, Alara, something humans do naturally." She leaned her head slightly against his shoulder, enjoying the warmth. "I hope it makes a difference." Before he could respond, the lounge doors slid open, and a small group of junior delegates entered. They carried tablets and hollow screens, their expressions a mix of curiosity and hesitation. They were not official representatives, not yet seasoned diplomats, but their interest was sincere. One stepped forward, a young humanoid with soft, amber eyes. We wanted to ask about your ceremony," he began. "The barefoot walk, the carrying, it's unlike anything we have seen. Could you explain why it mattered so much?" Alara glanced at Kellen. He nodded slightly, encouraging her to speak first. "It's simple," she said, choosing her words carefully. "Humans have many traditions, some old and some new. This one is about trust. Walking barefoot is a way of showing vulnerability. Carrying me is a way of showing care and responsibility. Together it communicates that we choose to support each other, even when the ground is cold or uncertain." The young delegate tilted his head, processing her words. "So it is not weakness?" he asked. Alara shook her head firmly. "No, it is strength. True strength is choosing to care, even when it would be easier not to. Strength is holding someone up without demanding anything in return. It is the courage to be seen as you are and the courage to support others as they are." A ripple of understanding passed through the group. One marrow in the back made a soft clicking sound, a sign of approval. Another, a small Skarn youth, nodded slowly, his metallic eyes reflecting the lights above. Kellen spoke then, adding his perspective. "Many species define power as dominance or control. Humans, we often define it differently. Power can be patience, it can be empathy, it can be action that protects others without coercion. That is what today showed." The delegates exchanged quiet glances, murmuring among themselves. Even without fully understanding human emotions, they sensed the impact. The subtle power of trust and care had reached them in a way that no data analysis ever could. Alara leaned back again, feeling the warmth of the lounge seep into her chilled feet. She had not just walked barefoot across the platform, she had shared a piece of human philosophy, lived through action rather than words. The implications were spreading already, in whispers, recordings, and silent glances among the delegates. Kellen watched her quietly. He noticed the small details, the slight pink returning to her toes, the light in her eyes that spoke of satisfaction, the calm confidence that came from being understood. He understood more clearly than ever that humans had a subtle power, one that was often underestimated by those who measured only what was visible or immediate. "Do you realize," he said quietly, "that this moment may change how humans are viewed across the galaxy?" Alara looked at him, eyes wide. "Do you really think so?" "I do," he said. "They've seen something real, something that cannot be copied by technology, cannot be faked. Trust, care, responsibility. These are human strengths they haven't fully understood until now." She smiled faintly. "I hope they remember it." "They will," he said simply. "Even if they don't realize it yet, this will stay with them. Humans have a way of leaving a mark not through force, but through example. You've shown it today." The young delegates approached closer, now more comfortable, more willing to learn. They asked about the origins of the tradition, about other customs humans practiced, and about the philosophy behind trust and mutual care. Alara and Kellen answered patiently, giving examples, recounting stories, and sharing observations from their lives. Every answer sparked more questions, more curiosity, and more respect. It was not just the ceremony that had impacted the station. It was the living demonstration of human values in action. The delegates began to understand that humans did not just survive. Humans taught lessons by living them, by acting with deliberate care, and by trusting others even in uncertainty. Kellen stood and stretched, sensing that their conversation was drawing to a natural close. "I think we've given them enough for one day," he said gently. Alara laughed quietly, a soft sound that blended with the station's hum. "Perhaps. But I think they will keep talking about it for a long time." Kellen nodded, smiling. "Good, let them. Humans don't just leave footprints on the ground, we leave them in minds and hearts too." The delegates began to withdraw, returning to their quarters or moving on to other parts of the station. But the lessons lingered. Conversations continued, quietly in private corners and through personal devices. Some delegates even wrote reports describing what they had witnessed as a new human strategy for interstellar cooperation. A phrase that captured the essence, if not the full depth, of what had transpired. Alara and Kellen walked slowly back toward the observation deck, hands intertwined. The platform below still shimmered, the frost glass reflecting their images like a memory etched in ice. The crowd had dispersed, but the impact of their choices remained, visible in subtle shifts, soft whispers, and thoughtful glances among the station's residents. As they reached the observation deck, they paused to look out at the stars. High Ridge Station floated among distant worlds, a link between civilizations, a place of learning, trade, and diplomacy. Yet in that vast expanse, Alara realized that a small act, a barefoot walk and a simple carry, had proven something profound about humanity. Humans were not the strongest, the fastest, or the most technologically advanced species present. Yet through trust, care, and deliberate action, they could inspire, influence, and change the way others perceived life, connection, and strength. Kellen rested his arm gently around her shoulder. "Do you feel it?" he asked softly. Alara nodded. "I do. We've shown them that humans can lead without force, guide without commands, and protect without dominance. That's power too," Kellen smiled. "Exactly. And it's the kind of power that lasts longer than fear or coercion. It stays with people. It shapes how they act." They remained there for a long while, watching distant lights and listening to the soft hum of the station. Ilara's bare feet were no longer cold, warmed by the quiet comfort of human connection and the gentle presence of someone who had chosen to stand by her. Far below, in corridors, in quarters, and in observation decks, conversations about trust, care, and human philosophy continued. The ripple effect of a simple action, the carrying of a barefoot bride, was spreading through the station. The story of what humans could do without weapons, without displays of dominance, but with integrity and courage, was already beginning to take root. And as Alara leaned against Kellen, she realized that this was only the beginning. The galaxy would see more of what humans were capable of, not through conquest, not through fear, but through simple, deliberate acts of understanding, care, and trust. The stars outside glimmered faintly, as though acknowledging the quiet power of the human example. High Ridge Station, for all its metal and machinery, seemed warmer now, filled with the subtle resonance of something deeper than protocol or tradition, something entirely human. Ilara smiled softly, closing her eyes for a moment. This is how humans will leave their mark," she whispered. Kellen squeezed her hand, understanding completely. "And they will, one small step, one simple act at a time." They remained there, side by side, looking out into the endless expanse of the galaxy, knowing that trust, care, and courage, small and gentle though they were, could change the universe in ways more profound than anyone had yet imagined. The ripple of the ceremony did not fade with time. High Ridge Station, usually a place of formality and quiet routine, had been subtly transformed. The delegates who had witnessed the barefoot bride and the mountain man carried that memory into every interaction, every conversation, every corridor they walked. Some of them discussed it in scientific terms, others philosophized, but all of them were changed. Ilara and Kellen walked together through the station's observation corridors, their steps quiet, almost meditative. Outside the thick glass, stars glimmered in the darkness, and distant planets shone like tiny lanterns scattered across black silk. There was no one to laugh now, no one to judge. Only the hum of the station and the soft whisper of recycled air. "Do you think they understand it?" Ilara asked, her voice soft. "The trust, the meaning behind it." Kellen glanced at her, expression calm but certain. "Some of them do, others will take longer, but everyone who saw it, everyone who paid attention, they felt it. That is enough." Actions speak louder than words. Ilara nodded, her bare toes brushing the smooth floor. It was strange, the way such a simple act could create ripples so far-reaching. On Earth, barefoot walks had been about connection, connection to the ground, to the environment, to one another. But here, millions of miles from home, her choice had become a symbol unintentionally powerful. As they walked, a small group of young delegates approached. They were students, apprentices, and junior researchers, not yet seasoned diplomats, but curious beyond measure. One of them, a humanoid with faintly luminous skin, stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said, voice tentative. We wanted to ask about your ceremony." Ilara smiled softly. "Of course, what would you like to know?" The young delegate hesitated. "Why did you walk barefoot, and why did he carry you? It seemed so simple, yet it was so impactful." Kellen and Ilara exchanged a glance, a small smile passing between them. This was exactly the conversation they had hoped to inspire, not just observation, but reflection. "Walking barefoot," Ilara explained, "is a human tradition. It shows trust. It shows that you are willing to step forward without protection, without hiding. It's a symbol of belief in the world and in the person you are joining. It is not weakness, it is choice." "And carrying me," she continued, "that shows responsibility. Strength is not in proving yourself alone. Strength is in holding someone up when they need support. Trust and care are two sides of the same coin. One cannot exist without the other." The young delegates nodded, absorbing the words. One Marrow scholar clicked softly, a sound of approval. Another, a Skarn youth, looked thoughtful, as if trying to translate the concept into something his species could understand. Even those who did not fully grasp human emotions sensed the depth of meaning. Kellen added, "Many species measure power by dominance or technology. Humans often measure it by action, by the care we give and the promises we keep. You cannot fake it, you cannot manufacture it, you live it and the world sees it." One of the junior Vayashi scribes tilted her head. "So, humans lead without authority, without force?" she asked. "Sometimes," Kellen replied. "Leadership can be quiet. Leadership can be an example. You do not always need words or weapons to show strength. Sometimes it is the act itself that teaches the lesson." Ilara noticed the small ripple of understanding spreading among the students. Their initial curiosity had turned into reflection. They were learning not from books, not from lectures, but from witnessing choices lived with integrity. "I think this is what the galaxy needs," Ilara said softly. "Not just rules or orders, but examples. Actions that inspire others to act with trust, with care." The students nodded. Some took notes, some simply watched, absorbing every word. They would carry these lessons back to their home planets, to other stations, to their families. A simple barefoot walk and a carry had turned into a universal lesson about trust and strength. Later that evening, Kellen and Alara found themselves on the station's top observation deck. The platform stretched outward, a vast panorama of stars and planets. The galaxy felt infinite, yet somehow intimate, as though the small actions of a few could truly matter. "Do you think anyone else will try this?" Alara asked, glancing at him. "Perhaps," he said. "And that's the beauty of it. Humans do not need everyone to follow our ways. We only need to show them that there is another way. Sometimes that is enough to change the way a species thinks, even if they never admit it." They leaned on the railing, hands entwined. The stars reflected in their eyes, countless possibilities stretching before them. Below, the station continued its gentle hum, oblivious to the profound shifts happening in the minds of those who had watched the ceremony. News of the event spread beyond Highridge Station, reaching nearby trade routes, research outposts, and even distant colonies. Reports were sent as simple observations. Human ceremony observed, trust demonstrated, impact noted. Analysts debated, scholars discussed, and young diplomats shared stories of the barefoot bride and the mountain man. Each retelling emphasized the same core truth. Humans had shown the galaxy that strength could be gentle, powerful, and enduring. Alara and Kellen were invited to speak at informal gatherings, often in small rooms filled with students, apprentices, and young diplomats. They shared stories about human customs, about trust, and about the ways humans lived their values in action. Every time the room grew quiet, attentive, reflective. Their words were simple, but their experiences made them profound. One of the gatherings was in a small classroom on a neighboring habitat module. A group of alien students sat cross-legged on cushions, listening intently. A holographic display above them showed images of humans in their daily lives, walking barefoot on beaches, helping one another across streams, sharing meals, and carrying each other across difficult terrain. The students whispered, amazed at how simple actions carried such meaning. "Humans are remarkable," a young Vayashi said, voice soft. "Not because of technology, but because of what they choose to do for each other." Alara smiled. "It is not just humans. Any species can choose trust and care, but humans often try even when it is hard. We take small steps, one action at a time." Kellen nodded. "That's all anyone needs to do. One small act of care can inspire countless others. It can ripple outward, across stars and systems, shaping minds and hearts." Word of the ceremony reached the station's archives, where historians and cultural scholars began to study it carefully. They compared it with previous human traditions, analyzing the symbolism, the psychology, and the societal impact. Articles were written, papers published, and discussions held. Even among species that were traditionally skeptical of humans, there was a newfound respect. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but their unpredictability came from depth, integrity, and courage rather than chaos. Meanwhile, back on the station's corridors, students and junior diplomats began experimenting with similar actions in their own cultures. Small acts of care, quiet demonstrations of trust, and intentional support of others began to appear in routines, meetings, and ceremonies. It was subtle, almost invisible at first, but noticeable to those who observed closely. The ripple from a single human ceremony was growing, reaching beyond the walls of the platform into hearts, minds, and habits across species. Alara and Kellen continued to live their example, not for recognition, but because it was natural to them. Walking together, supporting each other, choosing care over convenience, these small actions were simple and profound. Every day, they demonstrated that trust and strength were not mutually exclusive. They reinforced it in every interaction, teaching, guiding, and inspiring others. One evening, as they returned from a long day of discussions and presentations, they paused at the edge of the observation deck, overlooking the endless expanse of the galaxy. The stars seemed brighter than ever, as if acknowledging the small but significant human impact. Alara rested her head on Kellen's shoulder. "It's incredible," she said softly. "One barefoot walk and now this. They are thinking differently. They are acting differently." Kellen squeezed her hand gently. "That is the power of choice," he said. "One deliberate action done with honesty and care can influence countless others. You chose to show trust, and now others are learning from it." Alara smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. She realized that humans had a subtle but undeniable influence in the galaxy. They were capable of inspiring without domination, of teaching without force, and of changing perceptions through quiet example. In the following weeks, more species began incorporating similar acts into their own rituals. Simple gestures of trust and care appeared in meetings, ceremonies, and daily life. Alien students mimicked the barefoot walk on different surfaces, symbolic of openness and vulnerability. Young diplomats practiced holding one another in symbolic support during complex negotiations. The ripple continued, spreading far beyond Highridge Station, carrying with it the essence of human values. Alara and Kellen watched this quietly from their observation deck, knowing that their small actions had grown into something far larger than themselves. The barefoot walk had been the first step, the carrying had been the bridge, and now the galaxy was slowly learning to embrace trust, care, and mutual respect. They did not claim credit. They did not need to. What mattered was the impact, the subtle shift in consciousness, the recognition that strength could be gentle, that trust could be powerful, and that simple human actions could inspire profound change. The stars continued to shimmer outside the deck, distant lights in endless darkness. Alara and Kellen remained together, side by side, hand in hand, knowing that their choices, however small, were leaving a lasting imprint. They had begun a quiet revolution, not of technology or force, but of values, empathy, and the enduring strength of the human heart. And as they watched the galaxy stretch out before them, the two humans understood something profound. The smallest acts of care could ripple farther than any weapon, any command, or any declaration. One barefoot walk, one deliberate carry, one simple vow could change perceptions, inspire others, and leave a legacy that outlasted the stars themselves. The universe was vast, the challenges immense, but for the first time the humans had shown that their way of life, based on trust, courage, and care, could be a force that resonated across species, systems, and civilizations. Alara lifted her gaze to the nearest planet, a tiny blue sphere among many, and whispered, "This is only the beginning." Kellen nodded. "Yes, only the beginning. And together we will continue to show the galaxy what humans are capable of. Through action, not words, and through care, not fear." They stood in silence for a long time, letting the enormity of the galaxy wash over them, feeling the weight of possibility, hope, and quiet power that stretched far beyond the station, far beyond their moment, and into the hearts and minds of countless beings who had witnessed, learned, and been inspired. Time on Highridge Station moved slowly, measured by the hum of life support systems, the subtle rotation of the station around distant stars, and the rhythm of footsteps across frost-glass floors. Yet despite the station's careful routines, the memory of the ceremony remained alive. It lingered in conversations, in quiet reflections, and in the choices of those who had witnessed it. Alara and Kellen had returned to their daily life on the station, though their life had changed in ways subtle but profound. They no longer moved merely as individuals. They moved as a symbol of trust, care, and the quiet strength of humanity. Their presence, like a current, influenced those around them, shifting the rhythm of everyday life in small but lasting ways. Visitors continued to arrive, some curious, others skeptical, but all attentive. The ripple of the ceremony had reached far beyond the ceremonial deck. Stories of a barefoot bride carried across a frozen floor, and a man who bore her with deliberate care circulated through corridors, ships, and colonies. Each retelling emphasized the simple, powerful lesson: strength could be gentle, and trust could be profound. One morning, as the station's artificial sun rose with its soft glow, a group of young delegates approached Kellen and Alara. They were from distant colonies, not yet seasoned with politics, hierarchy, or expectation, but full of curiosity and hope. "We have heard of your ceremony," said a young humanoid voice tinged with awe. "On our planet, we rarely show vulnerability. We hide what we feel, but your actions, they were different. They changed how we see trust, strength, and responsibility." Alara smiled softly. "It is simple," she said. "Trust is not weakness. Strength is not always force. Actions matter more than words. Sometimes showing care is the bravest thing a person can do." Kellen added, "You can choose to support others not because you have to, but because it is right. That is a form of power. It may seem small, but its influence spreads farther than anything else." The young delegates listened in silence, absorbing the meaning. Some took notes, others simply reflected. What they learned was more than a lesson in human behavior. It was a revelation about the value of empathy and integrity across all species. Later, the station's cultural exchange office requested a formal meeting with Kellen and Alara. They were asked to provide insights into human practices so that other species might incorporate similar principles of trust and care into their interactions. The humans agreed, understanding that influence need not be loud or commanding. It was enough to demonstrate, to inspire through action, and to leave room for others to learn. During the meeting, delegates shared stories of small changes they had already attempted. One Vayashi scholar explained how a negotiation had gone differently after observing humans in action. Instead of insisting on dominance, he had allowed patience and understanding to guide the exchange. Another Amero student described how their research group had incorporated supportive practices, where team members assisted each other proactively rather than waiting for instruction. Alara listened quietly, smiling. "It seems small acts can create big changes," she said. "The universe responds to choices, not commands. Every gesture of care ripples outward. That is how humans have always built trust and community." Kellen nodded. "It is not unique to humans. Any species can choose this path, but humans are persistent in their efforts. We act, we try, we care, often in ways that seem small, yet these acts accumulate into something greater." The delegates paused, considering this. It was a concept that transcended their usual understanding of influence. Influence had been measured in resources, control, technology, but here was a different kind, quiet, deliberate, and deeply human. As days passed, more stations and colonies requested discussions, workshops, and exchanges with Kellen and Alara. They shared stories, demonstrated practices, and encouraged others to try simple gestures of trust and care within their communities. It was never about imposing their way, but about showing an alternative, a way that could foster cooperation, empathy, and mutual respect. In the quiet moments, when they walked through the station's observation corridors, Kellen and Alara would sometimes pause to reflect. The stars outside seemed to shine differently now, as if acknowledging the subtle shifts in consciousness that their actions had begun. They no longer needed to speak to make an impression. The very act of living their principles was enough. One evening, they found themselves on the highest observation deck. The station rotated gently beneath them, the galaxy stretching endlessly in all directions. Planets glimmered like scattered lanterns, and the blackness of space was dotted with points of light that seemed to whisper possibilities. Alara leaned against the railing, feeling the warmth of Kellen beside her. "It is remarkable," she said softly. "A barefoot walk, a single carry, and the galaxy is thinking differently." Kellen smiled. "Yes, that is the power of human action. You showed care and others began to understand it. It spreads without force. It ripples outward, touching lives and shaping perceptions." Alara watched as distant ships moved silently through space, ferrying travelers from one system to another. "I wonder how far it will reach," she said. "How many systems will change because of this?" Kellen's gaze followed hers. "More than we can count," he said. "And the impact will continue long after we are gone. The choices we make today create legacies that outlive us. One act of care can influence generations." Their reflection appeared in the glass, two humans standing against the infinite expanse. The memory of the ceremony was vivid, the lessons clear, and the impact undeniable. They realized that what had started as a simple tradition, a barefoot walk, a deliberate carry, had become a model for universal understanding. In the weeks that followed, new stories emerged across the Concord. A trader from a distant system wrote about how humans had demonstrated that true power lay in integrity and compassion. A scholar from a research outpost detailed how simple acts of trust improved communication and cooperation among diverse species. Small exchanges, subtle gestures, and quiet choices began to appear in protocols, training programs, and diplomatic practices. Humans had inspired a movement, not of authority or control, but of shared understanding. Kellen and Alara continued to live simply. They walked together, shared meals, engaged with delegates, and carried forward the values that had started it all. They understood that the impact of their actions was not measured in accolades or recognition, but in the subtle changes they observed in others, the moments when a young delegate paused, reflected, and made a choice guided by empathy rather than expectation. One afternoon, a young student approached them in the observation corridor. She was from a distant moon colony, her eyes bright with curiosity. "I tried something similar today," she said. "In my team, I encouraged others to share responsibility, to care for one another without needing instructions. They listened, and it worked. I think they understood." Alara smiled. "That is the point. Actions inspire even when they seem small. A single act of trust can encourage countless others to act with integrity," Kellen added. "And the more people practice it, the more natural it becomes. One choice leads to another, and the ripple grows stronger. That is how humans leave their mark." The student nodded, a sense of pride lighting her features. "I think I understand now. Strength is not only about what you can endure, but about how you treat others along the way." "Yes," Alara said softly, "exactly that. And that is something worth carrying forward, across stars and systems." As months passed, High Station became known not just as a hub for trade and diplomacy, but as a place where humans had demonstrated a philosophy of trust and care that transcended species. Stories of the Barefoot Bride and the Mountain Man spread far and wide, inspiring other civilizations to explore similar gestures of empathy and responsibility. Alara and Kellen observed quietly, never demanding recognition, content to continue their example. They understood that influence was not measured in headlines or statistics, but in the choices others made after witnessing a single act of courage and compassion. One evening, as the station rotated silently among distant stars, Kellen and Alara stood on the observation deck, watching fleets of ships move through the galaxy. Their hands were intertwined, warm and steady. "Do you think humans will always be remembered this way?" Alara asked softly. Kellen considered it, looking at the endless expanse of space. "Perhaps not in every story," he said, "but the ones who saw, who learned, who carried the lessons forward, they will remember. And that is enough. Influence is never about permanence in every mind. It is about the impact in those who choose to act." Alara nodded. "Then we just keep showing it, one choice at a time." "Yes," Kellen said, "one choice at a time, that is how we change the world." The stars outside glimmered like countless candles in the dark, each one a reminder of possibility. High Station hummed quietly beneath their feet, the subtle rhythm of life and movement echoing the enduring lesson of humanity. That trust, care, and deliberate action could inspire, influence, and endure. As they gazed out across the galaxy, Alara and Kellen understood something profound. The barefoot walk and the careful carry had been just the beginning. Every act of courage, every choice to support others, and every demonstration of trust was part of a larger story, a story that humans were writing across the stars. They remained together, silent, hand in hand, feeling the gentle power of their actions ripple outward. They had shown the universe that humans could lead through empathy, inspire through care, and leave a legacy through integrity. The galaxy was watching, learning, and beginning to change, one deliberate act at a time. In the distance, new planets awaited, new civilizations stirred, and new stars twinkled, as if acknowledging the quiet yet undeniable power of humanity. And in that vast expanse, two humans stood together, knowing that they had begun something far greater than themselves, a living, breathing example of what it truly meant to be human. The universe would never be the same, not because of weapons or domination, but because of trust, care, and the strength that comes from choosing to act with integrity. Alara rested her head against Kellen's shoulder, and for the first time in a long while she felt the weight of possibility settle into warmth and comfort. The barefoot walk, the deliberate carry, the vows of trust, they had all led to this moment. The galaxy had learned, subtly and profoundly, that humans could inspire without force, lead without coercion, and create change through the quiet power of compassion. Kellen looked down at her, eyes soft with understanding. "This is only the beginning," he whispered. Alara nodded. "Yes, and together we will continue to show them." And so, as the stars stretched infinitely around them, the two humans stood on the observation deck, hand in hand, knowing that their simple choices, one barefoot walk, one deliberate carry, one vow of trust, had begun a legacy that would ripple across the galaxy for generations to come. The universe had witnessed the strength of care, and the strength of care had changed the universe.